Hello, everyone. I hope you all had a nice Easter if you celebrated. I'm currently recording this on Easter right now, and I should be putting it out tomorrow if I don't end up being too busy. Um, it's been a little while since I've done a rambling, and I think very conveniently the last one was also on um, a game that I played recently as well. I don't think I've done any since the Outer Wilds one. So today, I'm here to talk about another game that I've put a lot of time into, and have been thinking about a lot since I started playing it. And although I'm not anywhere near done with it, I think I've put enough time into it to form some sort of coherent opinion. And that game is Final Fantasy XIV, which some of you may have played. I imagine you're probably clicking on this video because you've played Final Fantasy XIV. It'd be kind of weird if you didn't. Or maybe you just like hearing my opinions on things, in which case, I'm flattered. So for those of you not in the know, for some reason, Final Fantasy XIV is a massive multiplayer online role-playing game that takes place in the always different setting of the Final Fantasy games, because everyone takes place in a different universe. And you take up the role of the Warrior of Light, who goes off to fight the etheric beast gods known as the Primals, and the evil Magitech Empire, in order to save the world and all of that. There's a lot of stuff that happens in the game. The story is quite expansive, and ends up changing a bit as you go from expansion to expansion. What I've described now is sort of a general overview of ARR, A Realm Reborn, the quote-unquote base game of Final Fantasy XIV. I have only recently started Heavensward, so I'm not really going to talk about that too much. Most of what I'm going to be saying today is in regards to ARR, which I do have a lot to say about, because I don't think I've ever had an experience quite like it in a game before. So I guess to start off, you choose your character, you customize them. Me being the definitely not a sheep that I am, made my character an Aura, which is one of the sort of dragon people, and I made him a Marauder, which is the tank sort of barbarian class in the game. And the start of AR is really interesting. You get this opening cutscene where you talk to this big crystal who's God, and then you get to see the main villain of ARR, and you don't really get much explanation as to what's going on for a little while, which creates a lot of intrigue in the narrative. But it's honestly a little difficult to stay focused on pursuing the main story, because pretty much right from the get-go, you're thrown into this starter region, Limsa Laminsa, if I'm remembering how to pronounce it correctly. Sort of this big coastal city in the surrounding plains, where there are tons of people that have a lot of different quests for you to do. Now, the approach here to the early game, I find, is really interesting. You see, typically, when you start off in an RPG, you're going to be going off fighting goblins or bandits, things of that nature, as most of your starter quests, because you're a low-level adventurer and you've got to work your way up to the big stuff. In ARR's case, it's a little bit different. They have you start at a much lower scale. Some of the first few quests primarily consist of going around and collecting various items for people. Like, what was it? I think you bring a bunch of herbs or flowers or something to the guy at the tavern, and, you know, you'll repeat something akin to this about, 17 times in the earlier hours of ARR. which is a really good way to get you moving around the map and talking to the characters. Um, and there are a lot. Boy, let me tell you, there are a lot of people to get to know in ARR. And it's sort of a fun mental challenge, memorizing everyone, creating strong associations and impressions. They took a very interesting creative approach with the vast majority of the characters in the game. Obviously, very big game. I understand that they didn't have a ton of money when they started making it, so most of the NPCs don't have any actual voice lines. There also isn't any sort of actual audio cue for when they speak, like beep speech, like you'd find in like a pixel game or something. There is none of that. There's no actual audio when it comes to most of the characters' dialogues. So the game, in a not very handholdy way, which I like, sort of forces you to pay attention to what people are saying, dedicate a lot of your focus and your time to taking in the information that they give you. The game isn't just going to be hand feeding you all of this important information. You are the one who has to stay invested. And if you're not able to pay attention and keep track of what's going on, that's just kind of your own fault. Taking this sort of approach in which you give the player the opportunity to fail in various ways reminds me a lot of the Souls games, which, as some of you may know, I'm quite fond of. Though, of course, on the rare occasion that you do meet an NPC who has spoken dialogue and voice acting, it's a bit jarring, and make sure that you sit up and pay attention to what's happening. So, the early game happens like that for quite a bit. Eventually, you get to some of the bigger content, some of the raids, the dungeons, a lot of the things that an MMO typically sells you on. And I quite like them, in all honesty. They're pretty interesting in ARR. You do a lot of walking around, picking up items, opening doors, repeating that again about 1 or 2 times, depending on the length of the dungeon. And then usually there's some pretty cool, unique boss encounter at the end that has 2 or 3 different unique moves, and then it's over in about 2 minutes. Though, an important thing to keep in mind is you're probably going to need about 10 hours or so to get to that. And this is where I sort of talk about the pacing of ARR. And what sort of person I think it's geared towards. So, as some of you may know, ARR is quite long. I think it's about 30 hours or so. I think it actually took me around like 40 to get through. Because, there was quite a bit of interesting little side stuff going on in a few regions. Some of the NPC quest lines I was a bit curious about, so I decided to dump a bit of time into them. But it is a bit of a time investment to get through. And, if you're a person who wants to get something out of every time that you sit down to play the game, if you want to make a little bit of progress, if you're only able to sit down for 1 or 2 hours a day, it's probably not the game for you. If you have nothing going on, nothing better to do, you could probably sit down for about 10 to 12 hours, do a lot of walking around, complete quite a few fetch quests, maybe read some dialogue, and at the end of it all, you can probably get to a dungeon of some variety that will take you about 15 to 20 minutes to get through, and you'll maybe think something about it by the time it's over. Now, I gotta say, as a person who, at the time of starting FF14, had absolutely nothing going on and nothing better to do with my time, 14 provided a wonderful opportunity to give me something to do with my time. So rather than sitting around the house, reading a book, watching a TV show, replaying some other game I've already played, or getting out and going for a walk or something, I instead was able to sit down at my desk and for several hours on end walk around this very expansive world, occasionally getting into random combat encounters with a variety of fantastical creatures and interacting with people who have no voice and whose identities I wasn't really able to imprint upon myself due to the lack of speech or any sort of audio association I was able to create with them. This then, of course, went on for about a month or so. I did end up putting about 40 to 50 hours into the game, and as you can imagine, you have to like a game quite a bit to dedicate that much time to it. Now, ARR is broken up a little bit by some of the big boss fights, the primals, who are the sort of elemental, magical deities worshipped by the various beast folk who you find across the world of 14. And the boss fights against them were some of the highlights of the game, and they were also the parts that I was looking forward to the most, because I've been informed, I've been given the impression, and I've seen for myself that a lot of Final Fantasy XIV bosses are marvels of MMO game design. So, needless to say, I was quite excited, and my expectations were definitely somewhere around the ballpark of what I ended up getting out of them. Now, naturally, you don't just want to drown the player in this sort of content, because then it's going to get stale, it's going to lose the same oomph that it had, it's not really going to be as impactful. So I think it was sort of smart the way they kind of divided up the parts of the story with the primal boss fights. Probably the most notable of them would be the gap in between Ifrit and Titan, in which you spend a lot of that time sort of going around between different regions, meeting a lot of new characters, familiarizing yourself with the cultures of the various different places, doing quite a few different side quests. A lot of really small-scale, grounded stuff that really makes you feel deeply entrenched in the world. I heard that apparently they cut down this part of the game a little bit from what it originally was at release, which I think is kind of unfortunate in a way, because when it comes to a world as large as the one in 14, it's quite valuable to really come to care about the place that you're spending so much time in. So, you know, if it were up to me, I think that portion of the game would probably be the one that could use the most work, just to really make sure that you understand the place that you're operating in. Nah, you know what? I can't do this. I can't fucking do this anymore. Trying to think of ways to be complimentary to this game is not working for this rambling format. It's supposed to be pure stream of consciousness. If you've endured the first 7 to 8 minutes of this video, whatever I end up compiling together for it, I applaud you for your immense patience. I can assure you, however, it probably pales in comparison to the patience I showed when it came to me playing through A Realm Reborn, because holy fucking shit, this has to be the least amount of fun I have ever had playing a game. Have you ever played an RPG in which the first 2 to 3 hours is spent doing menial labor fetch quests, basically being an exaggerated mailman for random fucking people? And no, I'm not talking about being like the courier in New Vegas. I'm talking about literally just picking up mundane packages for people, and then walking in between various locations in Limsa, and fucking nothing happening. Just nothing. And then you somehow, for the course of the next couple hours, go from being that to then, oh, you have like a couple encounters with some bandits, and then a big gargoyle, and then suddenly you're a fucking local hero, like you're a national hero. Because Limsa is like its own country, and you're getting like an award from the hot pirate lady that runs the country, right? And then this almost immediately turns into you becoming some sort of internationally renowned figure, and then going and fighting basically minor deities, semi-regularly. I say semi-regularly, actually it's quite rarely, because the gaps in between the primal fights and ARR are so long. Oh my fucking god, the gap between Ifrit and Titan. Oh my god. Holy shit. You know, I was told the gap was like 3 or 4 hours, and I don't know, like 2.5, 3 hours into it, I thought, you know, I feel like I should be getting pretty close right now, so I looked up the list of main quests in ARR, and saw that I had like 40 fucking quests left to do before the Titan fight. Oh, I was so fucking close then, let me tell you. I was so close. But why didn't I drop it? Surely, there must be something in this game, some redeeming quality that led me to hold on. And what was that? Well, it's the promise of better things to come. I was told, you know, After Story was pretty good. Heavensward, kinda peak. Stormblood, depending on your preference and things, pretty peak. And I'm not giving Squeenix any money for this piece of shit, so I'm in the free trial. You know, I'm not paying for a subscription for this. So, you know, that's where my journey will end for now. Whenever I get to it, who knows, maybe enough time passes and they put Shadowbringers on the free trial, and Shadowbringers is apparently Zenith of the Medium or something. So, maybe I'll like that whenever I get to it, but, yeah, the prospect of a better story, better characters that I actually care about, better boss fights, better raid content, the promise of that drove me forward. And also the fact that I am terminally stubborn, and if I set my mind to finishing something, to reaching something, I am going to do it, irregardless of the fact that I am not enjoying any part of the process. So, the vast majority of ARR was just such a fucking miserable slog. I cannot recall playing a game that made me tired while in a VC. You gotta understand this. If I'm sitting in my chair, I'm talking to people, and I'm playing some sort of game, I'm being stimulated. My brain is focusing on things, and it's keeping me awake. I can do that till like 3:30 in the fucking morning. I'm sitting here playing ARR. It's like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and I'm fucking trying not to fall out of my chair. I'm trying not to have my head slammed down on my desk. I don't know how they managed to do this. It must have been some sort of meticulous craftsmanship to create a gameplay loop, a story, characters, combat that is so fucking mind-numbingly boring that I'm literally falling asleep at the wheel while doing it. I didn't know that was fucking possible. I've played a little bit of MMOs before. You know, I played Star Wars The Old Republic a bit in like middle and high school. And the gameplay is really not that different in that game. But what is it? What is the difference? And I think the big difference is probably other MMOs got more voice acting. The narrative is like actually existent. And it's not so unbearably long for what it is. That could maybe be a good way to talk about my feelings about ARR. Other than rambling about any other stuff, because, you know, I like, actually, the third act, or whatever. The last chunk of ARR where you're dealing with the Garleans, because, my god, my antagonists are actually characters who are regularly showing up and saying things, and doing things, and creating conflict, and giving me a reason to give a fuck about whatever I'm doing. But the vast majority of ARR, oh, brother, it's such a time investment to slog through it all. I feel like it actively disrespects my time. To ask a person to put dozens of hours of their time into something that is so unrewarding, it's unlike anything I've ever seen before. A good way I've heard it described is that 14 gatekeeps itself. All the stuff past the base game is great, supposedly. But you just gotta get past the 2.5 days straight of absolute mind-numbing slop content to get to it. And you think I'm gonna be complimentary to this game? You think I'm gonna go into anything that happens after it with an even remotely positive outlook? Almost everything I see after ARR is going to be through the lens of all of the bullshit I had to go through to get to it. How fucking miserable I was going through it all. And that's gonna make it really hard to sell me on anything that's good. There were some things that I liked in Afterstory. There are some things that I thought were pretty cool. You know, what was it? Snowvale, the one where you fight Fenrir at the end. I really liked that dungeon. I liked the boss at the end. That's been my favorite part of 14 so far. I quite like that. That's probably the thing I look on most positively out of my time playing it. The other thing I look on most vividly was when me and several of my friends finished my first run through Stone Vigil, in which, you know, not very used to doing, you know, team content, not really super used to doing a lot of stuff with other people, and needing to be conscious of how my class's role works in cooperation with the rest of my party. And I made like some sort of snide remark about the game, or how much I enjoyed Stone Vigil, and how I just don't give enough of a shit to learn how my class mechanics work. And upon being told, after like 30 hours of playing the game and having it insisted upon me that it gets better after this shifting goalpost, that you probably should have dropped the game already, I actually had like an episode of incoherent laughter. Like, I actually lost my fucking mind for about 2 minutes and could not stop laughing. I don't know what specifically I was laughing at. Probably at myself. Maybe at myself. Yeah, those are the two things I think of most vividly. And the rest of it is all kind of a blur because my cognitive functions were shutting down in order to preserve energy and only use the absolute bare minimum required for such menial work. It's gonna take a lot for me to like Final Fantasy XIV after A Realm Reborn. Whatever words I could think of to describe it with. Because even though I kind of liked Afterstory, I liked the last part of ARR, I liked some of the things in Afterstory, but still, they have their parts. You get like an hour or two of doing a fetch quest in which you talk to a bunch of non-characters who have no dialogue, I don't give a shit if it's written in text. There's nothing to keep my brain focused on it and associate the words on the screen with a character or really any kind of narrative significance. It still kind of had its dragging points. So maybe ARR's peak. You know, maybe it's peak fiction. Maybe a lot of the stuff in there is just gonna blow my socks off, knock me out of my chair. And maybe Stormblood will do the same afterwards, because I understand how much you like it depends on your preference for certain types of stories and characters, certain themes, things of that nature. But it will take so much. It will take so much for me to change my opinion on a game that gave me the most miserable several dozen hours I have ever dedicated to any piece of media. They will have to move heaven and earth for my consistent overall opinion of Final Fantasy XIV to shift up into slightly above neutral. Whereas most of the time it shifts anywhere from neutral to a good day to, hey, Misk, wouldn't it be funny if for your April Fool's video you tried to make a video in which you talk in a positive light about ARR? Well, guess what? It wasn't funny enough. It was way too fucking difficult. I could not bear it. I could not think of any more things to make up about liking it. It just is terrible. It's just such a fucking waste of time. It's such a disrespect of the amount of time that you put into it. There is just nothing worth it. And you know what's crazy? You know what's insane? That's still just the main content. 14 is such a massive game with so much side content. And I scratched the surface on a little bit of it. And then I was informed by people who are fans of the game, who have been fans of the game for years. You know, people who have completed all of the content that go, yeah, if you don't see a plus mark next to the quest, just don't do it. It's not worth it. Do you know what a piece of shit RPG you have to make for people to avoid most of the content in it? It's just bad. It's just fucking garbage. The fact that there were ever expansions released after ARR, the fact that 14 is still an active game and the servers weren't shut down before they decided to crash the moon onto the planet and basically start anew after hopefully shooting the original dev team, is a miracle. Or maybe whatever the opposite of a miracle is. I don't know. I do know, I do intend to play more of 14. You know, I got to the start of Heaven's Ward, which seems promising thus far. We'll see if it manages to hold my attention. But until then, A Realm Reborn has got to be one of the worst things I have ever played. And as a result, I kind of fucking hate Final Fantasy XIV. 16's pretty cool, though. I played that a few months before, because my girlfriend really wanted to get it. She doesn't have a PS5, so we split it. She played it, and then I played it. And I gotta say, as a newcomer to the franchise, I really liked 16. Thought it was really cool. So then immediately after, I've discovered my least favorite Final Fantasy game for the time being. Will anything ever drop below it? Well, you know, it depends on me playing other Final Fantasy games, which, you know, I'll probably do. But wow. Wow, it was so fucking bad. I could hardly believe it. And you know what's great? I finished ARR, like, 2 months ago. I finished the bulk of ARR, like, 3 months ago. Maybe more. Do you know how fucking bad something has to be for me to still be this vitriolic about it after all of this time? It's crazy. So my suggestion to you, if you are interested in playing Final Fantasy XIV, is consider how much you value your time and how much patience you have for absolutely terrible game design. And if you're a big fan of Final Fantasy XIV, well, I know a few of you. So I hope that you're correct about the things that come after. I've seen some glimpses of them, and I believe that you're correct. But if you're a big fan of Final Fantasy XIV, and you're one of those people who goes, no, the story doesn't get better after 150 hours, it was good from the start. Oh, ARR is great. The whole thing is a great, riveting story. It's one of the best stories ever told in a game before. About ARR, please get help. There's something wrong with you. I don't know what it is. If it's a disease, or if there's just some sort of moral imbalance within your soul. But there's something wrong with you if you think that. And may God have mercy upon you.